Liseye alışıyoruz. Çok yanlış. Hepsiyle çıkıyor. Komşu.
Kimse var mı? Burada bir çanta var.
Geliyor musun, kalıyor musun?
Geliyor musun, kalıyor musun?
Çantamı bulup
So that I preempt the position of this börek is cold.
Yok.
Tülin'cim şöyle geçer.
Çıkıyor mu o da? Yok şu an.
I'm sitting here. This is very good for your No, no, because this is very rusty. And I see them to the place. So I have go
So we have already communicated Babar's CV to you. There is nothing more that I can add. He is a very accomplished person in the international arena for the planning and settlement problems related to development. We met very nicely in 1963 in the Prince Geneva's basic design course. But he didn't like us then very much. He left to join his brother in Ghana. Then our paths crossed many times. He has been in the most coveted organizations for development and planning, and basically, and he has been in the Aga Khan Award in many different capacities, and now he will present a slice of his life to us. Lectern is yours.
Thank you. I always sort of get very worried when you start talking what you will say and you raise expectations. It's not like that. Well, thank you very much, all of you, for coming. Ben Türkçe'de konuşmak istedim ama hakikaten o kadar Türkçem iyi değil yani sizin onun için maalesef İngilizce'de konuşacağım ama böylece okuyabilirsiniz eğer hiç problem olursa çünkü belki bazen de benim İngilizce de o kadar normal değil. Yes. So what I've been working for a long time in developing countries on issues of housing and particularly squatting and informal housing. But today I want to talk a bit more of how formal planning and land use and housing policies create these kind of conditions that you have in every city. There are sort of two cities which are very different in terms of the quality of life, in terms of the quality of services, in terms of the quality of opportunities for making a living. So I want to look at how and what is the way, or if there is a way for these government or centralized policies to improve these parts of cities and to avoid this kind of dualism. Is technology at work? No, wrong one. There are only two choices, so this one has to be right. Yes? No?
Just come back.
If I make it go forward. Oh, this one.
Yes.
So, just a few illustrations about this kind of dual existence within cities. These are both Latin American cities, and you get the same kind of thing. This is in London. The quality of housing may be slightly different, but the distance in terms of the what is accessible, what is available in the lower income, lower provision, and lower service areas, and the kind of modern vision that is clear everywhere. This is in Istanbul, in Ataşehir, and you, I mean, obviously you all know this and you've seen this kind of thing. So, what has been, or how have, as I said, government policies helped to not just so much to create, but also to continue to have this kind of differentiation within cities. And this included a chart there of from Lahore in Pakistan to show you the kind of separation there is between the rich and the poor parts of cities. Here, the population is in the right-hand side, so 12% of the population is classified as upper income, 20% as middle income, and 68% as lower income. But when you look at the housing production, at the formal housing production, 12% of the houses, 56% of the housing is designed or produced for that 12%. So there is a kind of oversupply. In the middle, it's not so bad, but still, 43% of the housing is the one that is aimed at and can be afforded by the middle income, 20%. And for the 3/4 of the population, 68%, only 1% of the housing is produced by the formal housing market that it can be or is meant to be afforded by them. So this kind of attitude which creates this is, as I said, what I'm trying to look at and see how land policies, because land is obviously key because of the location, but also wherever the land is, that then determines what services you get. And so I want to look at that in some detail and see what we can. So, what is the role of land policies in shaping spatial outcomes? So the most important thing that obviously land policy in any country does is that it has made land into a commodity that can be traded, that can be bought and sold, as opposed to land as somewhere to locate, to use, to occupy for use as it used to be. So what kind of policies you have regarding land ownership, that makes obviously a difference. How public sector, how the public manages the land that it owns, because in each country, in each city, certain amounts of land are in the ownership of the of government at different levels. And so the way that they use the land, that has an important thing. Thirdly is land value capture. I use the translation literally, but I don't know whether you use a similar term, is when some action is taken, like so a road is built or even planning permission is given, it raises the value of that land. So everybody who owns that land is able to make a profit. But if the government is clever, it can pull some of that back through taxation and so on. So it's the extent to which land value capture takes place. And then the third one is the integration of the spatial planning, coordinating land use between government departments and so on. So that's the other way that land policies impact on these areas to make them less or more suitable from a housing policy point of view. In the same way, if you look at housing policies, we have again up to for the most, or the simplest, or the one is by using zoning. So if the government policies on zoning in terms of what kind of housing can be permitted, and whether there is a requirement to include or incorporate different income groups within any housing policy. So, for example, the UK's housing policy is now almost exclusively based on this principle that as they are running out of land, they only make land available to developers who will include a certain proportion of the houses that they build for lower income people. So it's no longer building houses, but using this mechanism to ensure that if not the needed, but at least some housing does become available to them. Then, of course, in many countries there is the housing that is actually built by the government. And Turkey has a very big program of public housing policy in the program. So that makes a thing. But identifying low-income households that can be supported by or should be supported by housing is another policy platform that can be used by governments. And then finally is as I said, every city has areas of low-income housing, often informal housing, is what programs there exist or are intended to be to overcome or to upgrade these settlements. So that's the fourth way that housing itself can affect it. And I'm going to just show you some examples from around the world to show how these kinds of policies have been put together to produce housing. This one is a thing from Singapore, which, as you probably know, has a very high degree of public housing. It has something like 90% of all housing are owned or are made available to as public, almost subsidized housing. And what the system that Singapore has evolved is to say that we will not sell land. You give the land away on lease. So it gives land on a 100-year lease. At the end of the 100 years, this land comes back to the government. And at that time, they have the opportunity to impose or initiate processes which say that we are going to sell this land at this price or anything more than this price, provided that it does X or Y or Z. So the government lays out basic plans for what it wants developed, what public provisions it wants to have, and uses that as the mechanism. And the bar chart there shows in the last, well, that's from about 1950-ish, the amount of land in public ownership. So each year, it's now owns 90% of the land. So from here on, every year, 1% of the land will come up for resale. So it has a very good mechanism now built into it, where it can direct the kinds of developments that take place. The second case study is from, if you like, at the other end of the spectrum in Kenya, just outside the capital, Nairobi, is one of the largest slums in Nairobi, close to 100,000 households. And like in India, the Ravi and so on, this has been festering or going on for a long time. And there has been a conflict between government wanting to do something and the people accepting or not accepting what the government want to do. And because of that, the conditions have just got from bad to worse, and no progress was made for a long time, until they came up by saying, okay, let's declare this into a special case. And in that case, which is interesting in that it doesn't happen in the rest of the country, but in this area, there is a lot of involvement of the households. So that it's all organized from the household level through to cells at the neighborhood level, through to clusters, and then, so the whole planning process of giving the direction to the development now uses and integrates the wishes of the population, plus because they are taking part in this, then they become greater owners of that scheme. And as a result, now almost all of these, the old shacks and shanties have been replaced by new housing. Unfortunately, at least I think unfortunately, it looks like this.
Nice.
But at least they participated in the design. They realized what land they have available. And there are some concessions to open space and so on, but as I say, it looks nice. But anyway, that's so. But the point being really that by involving, you can deliver something which at least, whether you agree or disagree, the community is accepting of it and it now a new set of pressures is now being built into the system, where buyers are coming and wanting to buy this housing, and a lot of those people are saying, okay, we'll go and build a little shack somewhere else and we'll sell it. So it's another process but it's a change. This is Chile, and I think this is quite an interesting model, where the government decided that for upgrading the housing and so on, they are actually going to use architects. It doesn't always happen. This is quite rare for a government to say we'll use architects to design houses. So they gave different areas to different architects or architectural firms. And this is a city, central area in Iquique, where the cost of the land, there was a certain amount was fixed, that this is the amount that the government will give for each household. Now, if you had land on the outskirts and so on, then that was quite plausible. But in the city center, it was only possible to build half a house by the time you bought the land and did the servicing. So the architect said, well, okay, let's design half a house, but design it in a way that the other half will be built in the same way as these people in the slums and shanties have always done it. So let's utilize that force and so on. So what you see here are these 2 rooms of what is supposed to be a 4-room house, but it's sort of in that way, and over time it's become this. So the infill, so each one has done their own thing, and here you can see with the orange, this is how now that 4-unit develops, and people have done all kinds of various things. They did a survey about 15 years, that's about the time when these photographs were taken, 5 to 6 years ago, to look for satisfaction. And in general, most people were very happy that they had now got that what they saw in the beginning was not enough, or why did they not get a proper house, but now they feel much happier that they've participated in this. And the only complaint that they got, or the major complaint, was that there weren't enough rules about what they could and they could not do. So it's an interesting thing that the demand for regularization and rules comes from the experience of the people doing it rather than from the outside. So that is another instance of this. And this process then started a whole move to use housing as urban development. So what you're doing is developing the city through the use of housing. And so it's a much more integrated, and it has a greater sort of lived-in and personality to it than I think other houses, other units. Recently, we were in Azerbaijan, and I just thought I'd show this because I was really struck by it. This is a typical building in Baku. It's under the Russian regime. This was a low or middle income housing development, but everything had to look sort of classical or nice from the outside. And it stood like this. The Russian, the changeover has happened now, I think almost 20 years ago. But when that happened, suddenly the rules and regulations were eased. There wasn't, first of all, that's another story, is what do you do with houses that the government has built? Who owns them? People just took them over because they were sitting there, nobody could move them. But what I found fascinating was what happens to the back of this building. So this is the same building. Originally, this is what there was here. Then somebody added a little balcony. This guy said, oh, that's little, I have a bit bigger balcony. And then make a room. And then, so you get the same kind of thing that was happening in Iquique. But this one, without the regulations, but a lot of the buildings now are like this. And I don't know what the legal status is because they own the house, but they, and one day I'm sure something will happen and they'll start crashing on each other. But until then, it's
that
a kind
one
of,
on the third floor, he has a big column over there.
yeah. I mean, because suddenly there was all the rules and regulations disappeared. There were no policemen, so people just did their own thing. As I said, I'm sure there's a disaster somewhere waiting to happen. But until then, it's if you ever go to Baku, go behind the buildings. It's a completely different world. This is the fourth thing, which is a kind of much more a relatively newer way of government to treat land and argue that if somebody has a piece of land and then as the government they build a road or they provide a bus service or they provide electricity, not even on the land, next door or whatever, this immediately raises the value of the land. And in fact, a lot of land speculation is done on that basis, that you think that a road is going to come and so on. So you buy up land cheaply and you wait for the price to rise. But now the government is saying, well, we should be a party to this. We have provided the transportation or the services, so we should increase the taxation on this and recover that. In South Africa, they are insisting on something slightly different and saying, look, at the moment, you have a certain building envelope possibility. We can allow you to do more than that. So normally you would only be allowed 3 or 4 floors. We'll allow you to add more floors, but you must use that extra possibility to provide affordable housing. Interesting, we call it affordable housing. In England, affordable housing means housing that you cannot afford. The Brits are good at this. What they say is that, and the Brits are using the same kind of principle now. They're saying to developers that you must provide, let's say 20% of the housing must be affordable housing, which means it must be poor people's housing who can't afford it. But then nobody wants the other 80%. The people say, I don't want to live in a building where there are these poor people living.
But that's very English.
That's very English.
They don't want to sit in the same plane too.
Exactly. So you have this kind of thing where the principle is nice, whether you can actually get away with it. And this is in India, which is in southern India. And an interesting thing, in the first picture you can see what it used to be. There was a river, every now and then with the rains, it would the levels would rise, the place would flood. So the whole front of that was sort of slums and shantytowns. And the government said, okay, let's build some dams, and they built walls to contain the river. So that's the normal level, and this is the wall for the high water level, using this as a public space. Plus, on the other side, they can put buildings and shops and so on because they're now protected. So this, the value that is coming from this, and from the increased, what used to be squatter land, now the government is able to sell that at a high price and make money. So the government is recovering a lot of its infrastructure investment in the form of increased taxation, increased amenities, and so on. So that just, as I said, that's sort of indication of the range of things that are possible. Well, there are obviously many challenges in this process, because the first one is just the sort of political acceptance or social acceptance, the one that I talked about in England, that rich people don't want to live next to each other. So the term NIMBY, I think that's an Americanism, not in my backyard kind of thing. So that makes it different. But also there are financial considerations, that there are problems with fragmented governances. In many situations you have different departments or different sectors of government, and they are not coordinating their efforts sufficiently to maximize the benefits that could come from that. Often the market plays tricks. It suddenly is what you thought is going to be desirable and valuable doesn't become desirable for whatever reason, and so on. So it's a bit unpredictability. And then, of course, finally there's a data scarcity, that we don't really know enough of how people do what they do, how they do it, or we're not able to have the right kind of legislation for that. So these are some of the challenges that prevent us to move into getting rid of these disparities between rich and poor areas. But what are the things that would make it successful? And obviously political will is the most important one. That somebody in authority must have the ability to say, this is what we're going to do, and then implement it. In Pakistan we have a very interesting case where every government sets out a housing policy which never becomes law. So in 70 years we've not had a single housing policy yet. We've had drafts when the government changes. We have housing projects where the government takes government land, gives it to private developers, but before they can start to build houses, the government falls. So the new government doesn't want to be linked with that scheme, so they forget about this. So it just you need that kind of the ability to have that political will. You've got to be able to involve the people that are engaged in this, the residents, the people like the developers. So it has to be a real participatory planning, and there has to be the right sort of flexibility in the scheme, so that if the context changes or if what you're doing isn't suitable, then that can be modified. And then, of course, very important to have this sectoral coordination, so that land and building and politicians can work together. And then finally, robots monitoring and evaluation is another. So those are key things that are needed if you're going to be successful in trying to resolve some of these differences. So what can we conclude from this kind of thing? So effective housing policies or land policies are obviously key. They're powerful tools that can use it, but it depends on whether you can in the future use more leveraging of smart city technologies, whether you can, this idea that I was talking about using housing as urbanism, and so not totally segregating it, this is housing, that's planning, but using the two tools together. Developing innovative financial instruments so that the finance is both available for doing the work, but also that you can get back the investment through various taxes or whatever. And then finally, environmental sustainability has to be an important aspect of any development. So I'm going to stop. Your food will not get cold.
You have time. You can.
Yeah. So I would rather
entertain questions.
Yes, as I said, in particular, I would like to get some feedback from your experiences in Turkey, whether how successful or unsuccessful has Tokay been, what is happening with housing? How are you coping with
I can tell
this?
you something. The most important, the richest man of Turkey, Rahmi Koç, has had a villa built by Sedat Erdem. He was a star architect, and that house is in Tarabya, and it's wonderful view. But left at right of his house, there is a shanty town. Yes, but he lives with it. Yeah, but he's the richest man of Turkey.
So even he could not.
Yes, he has also a villa on the Bosphorus, for instance.
No,
That's
I mean,
something else. But
was
he's
he able
living
to change the surroundings? No.
No, he couldn't. No, he couldn't. No.
So,
Yeah,
so
that
money is not
Turkey.
everything.
Yeah. But also those houses you were mentioning, that in Azerbaijan,
Yeah.
in Baku. I live in a house that has been built already in 1967 by Beyhan Türel, and he's a very, very good architect. Really, it's a beautiful house. The house behind me was just 2 rooms, but now it became at least 12 rooms.
Has it gone high or has it gone wide?
White, yes, white. And it's now 3 floors. It was 2 floors, now it is 3 floors. Yes, it's like that. Yeah. Unfortunately for me, because they are quarreling, I can hear everything.
No, I don't think we have a cure
Yes.
for that yet.
Yeah.
So, can I take a yes? Yeah.
So that's Turkey.
In short, yes.
My name is Ahmet İdirdigil, lives in Bodrum. I'm architect. And my question is, the people getting from land, moving to the cities more and more and more. And quite big population concentration in the huge cities. I mean, if we think about environment and so on, and all this, the subject what we discuss, getting in this problem, I think. You didn't mention about the solutions. If any policy is successful, the people doesn't left their own land and own life and moving to the cities for a different environment or different culture, and it's getting also a big cultural deformation. I mean, what we saw in the Turkey. I mean, I'm 70 years old. When I was a kid, or I remember, just 20-25% of the people in Turkey lived in a big city. I remember, if I'm not wrong, Istanbul was around 2.5 million people, and the Turkish population was 13, even more. There's a 30 million, something like this. Now Istanbul, nobody knows, but at least 15 million, and I guess about 70% even more percent of the all Turkish population lives in a big cities. Just in Istanbul has more people than 7 biggest cities in Germany. Even both population are same. I think it's the policies of the land and the how do you call I don't know the rant ve kazanç.
Profit.
Speculation.
I need help, English help.
Speculation. Profit.
Yani tamamen rant politikalarıyla gelişen bir şehircilik sistemi var.
Let me answer that question in a
And then anyway, I mean, is that
Yeah.
any?
No,
You
no,
didn't mention about this case.
Yeah, no, that's okay. Because this is a question that is very often raised. And it's usually put in this way. I mean, I'm not saying you are totally doing this, but I'm generalizing the question that comes. That somehow people are moving to the cities and this must be stopped. This is, to me, there are two questions to ask in this. Why are the cities not moving to the people? You know, in Pakistan, we have something like 50 or 60% of the population is living in the rural areas, doing agriculture. In the countries that produce the most agricultural products, it's 0.5% to 2% of the population engaged in agriculture. Now, the problem is not whether they go to cities or not, but we cannot have agriculture being efficient enough to employ 60% or 50% of our population. So, first of all, if you ask me what is the problem is that we are moving towards agricultural policies, which mean that you don't need so many people, but we are not providing any alternative employment in those places. You talked about Germany, and it's the same in other European countries. Very small cities. Denmark, a city, is anything with a population of 5,000. 5,000 are in your backyard. So you have to think about what is the meaning. But nowadays, one person can be more urban than 1 million people in Bombay. Because if that one person has access to the internet, is as urban as anything. So we have what we should ask is, why are we, and particularly why are we not as government and planners, taking the city to the people? Why are we leaving it to those people to come?
This is the main question. That's what I mentioned.
So this has to happen that way. And it cannot be that you stop and so on, because if you just leave it, that's the only thing that, or the main thing that people can do. And if you don't mind to add another problem to this, in many countries now, the challenge of climate change is having a greater impact. We are having floods, earthquakes, we are having all kinds of disasters. In the disasters, these people are leaving and they're coming to form tent cities in different to the nearest city, because we are not prepared. So I would say that the question we should ask is not why are people moving to cities and how can we stop it, but why are the cities not moving to the people? What are we? They must become part of the urban life in the sense of access to information, to services, to goods. That is something that must go out to all the people. So I agree with you that that's a problem, but I think we need to look at it slightly differently.
Thank you.
I would like to hear your opinion about the coming future of the world population and how it is going to affect inhabitants of the world. Because we know that the world, we are presently living at the most populated world has ever been. Now it's going to diminish. And this is going to affect a lot both the cities and the urban. And what is your opinion about this population diminishing and how you predict about it?
I mean, first of all, the population of the world is slowing down.
Yes.
Everywhere, people are having fewer children, and so it's not going up like this, it's going to go down like this. So I think that our view of the world needs to change, and we say, instead of saying that urban must be 10%, no, we must see that they are. And we are not going to see an infinite increase in population size. It will reduce. And unfortunately, we are reducing it also by the way that we are, our air quality and, as I said, water supply, and so that's also going to lose. So I'm not, in the long run, that worried about that population and how will we feed them and so on. In fact, already, as I said, you only need about 2% of the population to work. And in many countries now, they're experimenting and saying, well, people don't need to work. You need to spend, because that's the problem. So I think we are in a transition phase. We are still used to thinking in the old style and not enough thinking in the new to welcome or to be ready for that change that I think is going to happen. So I'm much more optimistic about this.
Thank you.
Any other comments?
Yeah, well,
Okay.
Babar, when workdays were reduced, this was in late 1960s, from I think 5.5 days to 5 days, making Saturdays holiday and to a holiday in a week. We as hippies were very optimistic. We thought that that will increase and it will become 3 days a week holiday and 4 days a week, and it will be a leisure society. So people will be doing music, arts, and everything which is enjoyable, and the work will be done.
There will be no work.
It will be done by robotics and whatever. But when I started to study in London, the first thing the Barclays Bank did was they increased the work days from 5 to 6. So that dream did not work, but it was a dream. This is our little memento for you to remember us. And if you have any other questions, we have 15-20 minutes more.
well, then I can tell you an experiment what we did in Holland some 4 or 5 years ago. A student named Jaap was given every month $1,000 a month, but he must never work. He could study and so on, but never work. And after 12 months, they asked Jaap, well, how was it? And he said, well, I got very much bored because I couldn't work anymore. Because in Holland, when you are studying, most of the time you are working at the same time. So
No,
it's very
I
rare
think
that somebody can
this
study.
whole transition will be quite painful for a lot of people. They are not used to this, and it won't happen overnight anyway. It will be a gradual process.
Yeah.
So, but I'm sure that sooner or later we will get into a position where you don't have to work, or you don't have to do. It's like when somebody used to ask me, what do you work at? I said, I don't work. I have never done a job which I didn't want to do. Whether it was teaching or consultancy and so on, it was always things I wanted to do. So why should I call it work in that sense? It was a joy. So I think that we're going to make, or have to make, that transition. That people have to learn or how to do things to use their time more. I mean, not just sitting like this and going click on the mobile phone, unfortunately, that is if today we said to people you don't have to work, they would all sit with their
Yeah, but they get bored.
yeah. Well, somebody will invent another better game and so on. But that's not. I hope that that's not what happens. That the leisure time can be used in more productive or.
Maybe a better cultural education at schools.
If there are schools.
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe, I mean, life is life and school becomes one, or life, work, and school just becomes one.
Yeah, but you also have to provide something in schools. You have to provide culture, not only mathematics, physics,
Yeah,
or biology. I mean, that's not all.
yeah, but we
But
can
there is no
leave a
culture
lot
in
of that
Turkey.
to.
You don't learn anything.
Yeah, but a lot of it can be left to the robots.
Yeah, but then, but
I love
people will be so bored.
But what did people do, let's say, 1,000 years ago?
Robots as well.
Yes.
They wind away their lives. They didn't sit. You couldn't work at the farm every day. In no country was it that you had to be digging the field every day. There was a period where you dug the fields, then you didn't, and so there was. When you look at the total amount of time that was spent, it wasn't 24 hours.
But you can socialize. I mean, you sit and you talk.
Yeah. And
Because
this
that's
is-
what those lazy Mediterranean people do in the villages and so on. They sit the whole day in the coffee house.
You
But
philosophize.
people are not aware that they actually, if they work early in the morning, they do something, and late at night or in the evening when it's cool. So you could sit.
And I think there are some people that like and want to work, and that's
Yes.
fine. We should not say nobody will work. Those that want to, and for as long and so on. But I think it's to accommodate these differences that if we have the ability where we don't have to work in order to survive, then I think the world needs to change.
But you need it. Everybody should have the access to the same
Yeah.
housing and everything.
Yeah, it's a whole different structure then.
Yeah, you cannot transport this thing and say, okay, in the future it will be the same.
Ireland started paying artists a monthly salary. You might have seen it in the news. It happened in the last month. Initially a certain number of artists, and it's enough to survive because many artists cannot spend enough time on art because they have to do menial jobs to make a living, and art becomes, it's their profession, or it's what they do actually, or they want to do, but they cannot afford to produce art. And if they start becoming well-known artists, the salary will increase. So ask me, are the architects included as architects?
Oh, yes.
I'm not sure.
Of
I
course,
know
architecture is art.
actors,
Isn't it?
painters, sculptors, dancers are all
Architects
included, but
make
architects
good
are
money.
not sure.
It's art.
No, there is a, and
So there might be a different way of describing what work is.
Yes.
It-
I
it-
reminded of another similar, parallel kind of thing where there's a tribe of American Indians on whose property they discovered oil. And some few years ago, they said that we'll take this income from the oil and divide it, and everybody will just get that income, and you can do. And what they found was that a few people took that money, went to Las Vegas and started gambling, but a lot of them still did work because that was kind of, it became more than just a like hard work. It was more pleasurable to do it. And so I think all the experiments that have been done now in some Scandinavian countries and so on have shown that if you were to give people money or a basic income, they don't just sit on their backsides. They don't just sit in the pub.
Yeah.
They do work. I mean, work is only work if you have to do it. If you don't have to do it, then it could be fun.
Actually, the same thing was voted in Switzerland. I think 6 months ago.
Yes.
My son told me, and unfortunately, the result was no. To give a basic salary to every citizen in Switzerland. Of course, they have a small population. Let's bear that in mind. And in some countries, I can't remember where in Europe this
Yes,
was
they've
done.
tried it in Finland and I think
Yeah,
Norway also.
and it increased productivity, because not everybody, work doesn't mean going to an office 9 to 5 or whatever. There are lots of people, shop owners, people who would like to start a business. I think they benefited the most because they needed the basic minimum to feel comfortable to try something new.
No, I mean, in fact, if you think about it, in England now, a very large proportion of the population is getting paid for doing nothing. You know, I mean, okay, you call it different names and you look down upon it and so on, but I think it's a third of the working age population, for one reason or the other, is it's told to sit at home, because if they go out to work, they lose money. But, you know, so it's not that we can't afford it, but it's how to build it into a kind of the system in a way that allows both creativity and productivity to go on. So as I say, I'm an optimist. That things will work out.
So we can go out and start with a sip of wine.
Oh, I thought you said we go out and start working.
Actually, you know, in Switzerland, it came to a level that 3,500 Swiss francs. How much does it make you? A couple of million in Turkish. And as a basic salary, but the people, basically, they are conservatives, you know, politically, the Swiss populists, and they wanted no. They said that there will be no incentive of the country to do anything meaningful. Everyone will lay back and do nothing. And as you said, it's not like that, you know. You need to do something, you know, it's a human nature, you know. I mean, I know it from myself. I retired twice. I still work.
Another Swiss statistic you might want to remember. The lowest home ownership of any country is in Switzerland. About 23% of people own their houses.
So they rent.
They rent, or they're from cooperative, they're owned by cooperatives, so, but not.
Also,
there is
there is a
no
lot of government
ambition.
housing.
No,
Yes.
I wouldn't like living in
According
Switzerland.
to income.
Not for me.
But
They are
the
too
thing is,
strict.
And the highest
Yeah.
home ownership is in places like Ghana, Nigeria, because nobody wants to rent. So you have to build your own, the government doesn't do it.
well, in the Netherlands, I think in the 50s or the 60s, they started to make it more attractive to buy houses. It became something like you must own a house. But why did they do this? Because they thought, the authorities or the planners, they thought that if people would own their own house, they would become less dependent from the state. But now they are not happy anymore.
Good thing that not everybody is ever happy. But we have a chance now with the wine.
Yes.
Yes, we have.